Hello, everybody. We are going to be working in the same unit again this week, which is, I think, Unit 7. Let me just go back and make sure. Yeah, we're working on Unit 7. We're doing the second portion of Unit 7, which focuses on multimedia and interactivity, as it's titled in the book. You will also notice that we're kind of skipping over Chapter 10 right now, because in my mind, the Chapter 10 content goes better with Chapters 12 and 13, which we're going to do next week in the next unit. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't read it. It's just a matter of like the sequence. So for me, it makes more sense to cover forms and multimedia and then move on to the other topics. So that's why it's just a little out of sequence from what the author does, just so you're aware. All right, but we are going to focus on Chapter 11 today. And as I mentioned right before I hit record, I think this is one of the fun weeks of the semester because we get to throw multimedia onto our web pages, which I think kind of brings them to life a little bit. And I hope to also instruct you a little bit and kind of open your eyes to some of the concepts that go behind multimedia and how to really best use it on the web. Because I'm sure you guys will all agree that there's nothing more annoying than landing on a web page and having like a video or audio file like pop up automatically when you don't want it to, for example, and be really loud or whatever, and just really kind of throw off your whole user experience, in my mind. Some people like that too, so it's kind of a matter of perspective. The learning objectives for the chapter are listed here, so you can see we're going to look at a bunch of different types of technologies. We're going to talk about things like plugins and codecs and the types of multimedia files, how we can best add audio and video to web pages using the new HTML5 tools that are built for it, comparing that to all the stuff that we used to do in the past and why we've moved away from doing those things. We also will look at some technologies that are frankly outdated, but still might be relevant in some capacities, but it's important for you guys as developers to know about those. We're looking at creating image galleries and a couple of other little things that go with some of these tools. All right, let's start first by talking about how multimedia actually functions on these pages. Now, the whole reason that we are able to use our browsers to look at multimedia content on the internet is because our browsers now natively support audio and video. What's fascinating about that is it wasn't that long ago that they did not. So in order to actually look at look at a video on a web page in the past, or play music in the browser in the past, it required what we called plugins for the browsers. Often you would go to a web page, and if music was playing in the old days, it would trigger and say, hey, do you want to launch this other application to like listen to this music?
So it's kind of like a trigger block almost.
Yeah, in a sense. And what the workaround was is they came up with plugins that would attach to the browser separate pieces of software that would allow you that capability. And in some cases, depending on the kind of stuff that you're trying to listen to, it's still required, believe it or not. What's really kind of the major advancement in HTML5 when it became a standard is all the browsers, when they agreed to the standard, had to support HTML5 audio and video natively. And that's a major advancement for us as web developers because it really simplifies what we need to do. However, because you might go out into the field and revise legacy websites or applications, you have to understand the differences into how we got to where we are and what tools we used to have to use to overcome some of the issues of being able to do that. The helper application approach that the author is mentioning here harkens back to the early days of the web, where I remember like one of the first ways that we would be able to listen to audio on the web or video or watch video for that matter was to use this thing called the Real Player or QuickTime, right? Like these really like quirky applications, and they were not part of the browser, folks. It would just you would trigger a link, and then it would send the link over to this helper app, and then that would actually do the streaming for you. The only other way that you could watch audio or video would be to like click on a link or right click on a link and then download it, wait for it to finish downloading and then look at it. And that's not really even a helper application. When they came out with the plugins where it was actually just added to the browser and it would just work, that was a big step forward. So for example, you would have a plugin for Flash, right? And up until not that long ago, in fact, there's some video streaming services that still use Flash to deliver their video content. You would have to actually add the plugin first, and then you could do the work. So, like one example is those of you that are connected to Blackboard Collaborate right now, like Ethan is, in order for him to watch my live stream, he's got to put a plugin in his browser to pull that content in. There's no other way to do it right now. You have to have a plugin to make it happen. In the old days, you had to do the same thing just to watch audio and video at all. Now, that's kind of moved into a new era. The thing that is kind of interesting about working with audio and video is there's this problem that we have. Because audio and video files, when they're in their full resolution, in other words, at like full HD video, or 4K video for that matter, or an audio file that's of CD quality, or better, right, than CD quality, are very, very large files and very inefficient to move across the internet and stream. We have gotten to the point where the media streaming services are, if you have a fast enough bandwidth at home and the right equipment, you can actually stream like 4K video now. And some of you might already do that. I don't know.
I don't.
But the reality is that a lot of content, in order to be efficiently delivered to our devices, whether it's a desktop computer, Xbox system, your phone, your tablet, whatever, your Roku, whatever device you're using, it requires a significant amount of compression in order to take that really large audio or video file and squeeze it down to the point where you can actually stream it and not like have it be choppy, where you still can see everything to a reasonable degree. The fascinating thing is that we used to have these plugins that would actually handle that for us. So they'd have to have the file format on the server that was typically pre-compressed, and then you would have to have the tool on the other end that would receive it and then allow the streaming. In other words, the playing of the file, whether it's audio or video, while it's still downloading. Because that's what streaming really is. You're getting to watch it while it's coming down to your system. So in order for that to happen, you have to be downloading at a rate that's faster than the rate that you're playing, right? And I don't know if you guys, get this problem at home. I remember in the old days of high-speed internet and like Wi-Fi at home, we'd watch Netflix, and I swear like half the time, you're like, you get into an exciting part, and it's like, all right, here comes the spinning wheel again, and I'm waiting for it to spool up so that it can catch up, and then I would hit pause and wait, so that the progress bar would be a little farther than where the play position is. And maybe if you have really bad internet at home, you still have that situation. And if you do, I would encourage you to upgrade your bandwidth if at all possible. And if you're in a home environment, and I think to like my own home environment where I have, 2 teenagers and a wife and probably like 30 internet connected devices in the house conservatively, I've started like chronicling it, and it kind of blows my mind because everybody's got like at least like 10 devices that connect to the internet at home. It's like phone, the old phone, the tablet, the game system, the computer, the other computer, the laptop, it adds up. And then you have me on top of it where I have all these machines on at home running all the time anyhow. All right, so you need a lot of bandwidth at home these days, and you share your bandwidth with your whole family, right? So it's worth the extra money if you're on the internet all the time to get that little bit faster speed. So just a helpful tip. All right. One of the issues that we used to have is some browsers would much more quickly update their technology than others. And it always would floor me that some browsers, and I think of Firefox, when MP3s were kind of a thing, you know, everybody was using their iPods and whatever, and those like portable music players, and MP3 kind of became like the de facto music file format, how Firefox wouldn't play it, but Internet Explorer would, you know, like really weird things like that. What's really nice now is that because we've standardized in HTML5 on the audio and video formats being native, the players are built into the browser. You don't need to have a plugin for them. It really fixed a lot of issues. However, and notice the little issue at the bottom, not all browsers support the same codecs. And I'm going to tell you what, I haven't checked this link in a while, but let's check it. And it used to be not even that long ago that we would check this website and we would still find that not everything was supported equally across all the browsers. Okay, and I'm not seeing, all right, they used to have like a little thing here. All right, I'm not seeing it easily, so I'm out of here. That's how quickly I make my mind up. But the point is basically this, they had a list of what browsers support what. So the problem is that when we take audio and music files and we encode them digitally, there's different formats for doing it. Even MP3s, right, which is like standard for music, has probably about a half dozen to a dozen different ways that you can compress the files. Some really small and efficient, some with better fidelity. And, you know, part of, you know, my background, because I used to be involved with music when I was younger, and then for a while I worked as an audio engineer as well. I learned quite a bit about how audio and video is recorded and, more importantly, how it's compressed to digital formats. And you know what? Not all digital formats are equivalent, folks. When you take a file directly off of a CD, it's at a certain rate of encoding. So, for example, it's measured in two different things. One is the bit rate, and the other one is the bit depth. Yes, so two different things. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to pause the video here in class for just a second. All right, so what happens as we are having this discussion here in class is we have different qualities of files. And the high resolution CD quality audio will be in these top two formats, and these are considered uncompressed audio formats. Full CD quality for WAV files and AF files. When we start to compress audio files, in other words, remove some of that detail, not take as many snapshots per second, and not have as much bit depth in the audio, then we start to go to some of these compressed formats like MP3s, for example, or M4As, which are the ones that are on iPods or on iTunes. They use, it's basically an MP3 file, but it's like their own proprietary format. And then you have this OGG-VORP is open source, which is related to FLAC files. So those have a little bit higher resolution than MP3s and M4As, but don't really have a lot of popular acceptance. What you do see is people who use that technology and they compress to this format called FLAC, which allows for compression, FLAC. And no, and then you can take that FLAC file and decompress it back to full resolution. You know, so that's like audiophile people that when they like pirate music, that's like their favorite format. The other formats that you see here, the Unix sound file, that's not one that's really common at all, which it surprises me why it's listed here. But the other one, the MIDI file format, the MID, anybody who's a musician that plays keyboards or has music equipment that talks to each other, MIDI is just a set of instructions to play the notes. It's not an actual recording. So like when you hear like people that do electronic music, what they're usually doing is they're programming what notes are played at what times with what sounds, and that's in the form of a MIDI file. What's really cool about MIDI files is it's all numeric information like program code. So it's just instructions on an instrument to what notes to play. And yes, you can run MIDI files in a browser and it'll play your built-in sound synthesizer on your computer, and it'll usually sound pretty horrible. But professional musicians use that to basically generate really fancy stuff, and also to allow equipment to talk to each other. So if I am playing one thing on one instrument, it can talk to another instrument and it can sync up. And that's all done through MIDI. But in terms of what we use for the web, what most often you're going to see are MP3 files, the M4A files if you're like iTunes or Apple-centric devices, and every once in a while you'll see WAVs, AIFs, and OGGs. The other formats I think are pretty rare for use on the web, but what's interesting is those do work on the web. If you go now to the video file formats, you kind of have the same type of thing going on. Video compression is a lot more complicated than audio compression, because not only are you compressing the video signal, you're also simultaneously compressing the audio signal as well, right? So you're really compressing two signal paths. One's pictures, one is audio. The high-res formats for video are the ones that you see at the top. In fact, there's actually more than that, but the ones that work on the web, the MOV format, which is the Apple QuickTime format, and the AVI format, which is the Windows movie format, those formats both, along with the MPEG, the standard MPEG, the MPEG format, which you see abbreviated as MPG down below, all of those allow for full resolution video, just like we have with audio. So if you have a 4K movie, right, or like a Blu-ray quality HD movie, you can get the full resolution of the audio and video in those formats. However, those formats also allow for compression, so they can allow for lower quality results as well. But typically, those three formats are the ones where you see uncompressed video files. So the same quality that you would pull directly off of like a Blu-ray disc, for example. Some of the other formats are a little more sketchy. In terms of web delivery, the ones that are really most popular for web delivery is really the MP4 format. And if you pick one file format to deliver content video-wise on the web, where you have the video file on your own server or in your own account, MP4 is the one I most strongly recommend. The one that's brand new that they developed with HTML5 is the bottom one, called WebM. And I have been noticing that a lot of tools that now generate, web-type content will often encode into the WebM format. And it's considered, cool because it is an open source format. And really, it's very similar to MP4, borrows a lot of the same commonalities, allows for compression, but relatively high resolution as well. The problem that we have on the web with video files is this. In order to stream high quality video, you have to have tremendous bandwidth to really do it properly. When you watch a service like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or wherever you're watching your videos, YouTube, I don't know if you guys ever noticed, but there's usually quality controls. Like on YouTube, you can see the quality control, right? And in fact, you can even go in there and you'll see that most videos, even the HD ones, will have like scale down modes. And the reason they have that is so that if your connection is slow, it'll switch from the HD mode to like whatever your browser can support at the moment, so you can still watch the video, right? If you were locked in at the high resolution, but you had terrible bandwidth, you're not watching that video. It's just not going to come through to your device. It's just going to be choppy. It's going to stop, because you have to have the ability to download it at the rate fast enough to keep up with the playback. So for example, if I pull a movie, like a 2-hour movie off of a Blu-ray disc in full resolution high def, it's an 8 gigabyte file typically. How long does it take you to download 8 gigabytes if nobody else at home is using the internet? That's really kind of the question, right? If I'm here on campus, I can maybe do that in 20 minutes. I'm speculating, but 20 minutes? All right, well, if I can download a 2-hour movie in 20 minutes, chances are, you know, as I'm downloading it, right, it'll keep up, right? Because it makes sense, because it's a 2-hour movie. As long as I watch it at regular speed, and by the time I get to, you know, 20 minutes, half hour in, the whole thing's downloaded in the background, then I can keep streaming it. But what's fascinating is when you cannot keep up with that download rate and then try to play it at that resolution. That's the problem with video files. So video files tend to be highly compressed for delivery on the internet. They will compress both the video and the audio pretty significantly, and sometimes you'll get issues. So like if you're familiar with Netflix, when the bandwidth drops and all of a sudden you go from like a beautifully looking video to like something that looks like really horrible because it gets like grainy, and what they're doing is they're stepping down your quality more and more just to keep the video playing. But it indicates that you have a bandwidth issue. So these are really important considerations when we put media out on the web, because you cannot take like a full 2-hour movie and put it on your website most of the times. And here's why. When you buy web hosting out on the internet to actually put your websites out there, the space on the server costs money. And you're sharing that space usually with a bunch of other websites. And if you're putting one video out there, like one movie, and it's 8 gigabytes, that's a lot of storage. So every time somebody's watching that, they're pulling all that data down. All right, that's great, until somebody's watching on their phone. How much data do you get a month? So you're telling me with one movie I can burn out my whole data plan? Yep. And you know what? When mobiles first came out and they had like 4G, and people were like, wow, I can totally watch high-def videos on my phone now. What do you mean I burned my whole data plan in a half hour? That's what was happening, right? So that's another reason the mobile devices, some people do not have unlimited data. And the truth is unlimited data on mobile devices really isn't unlimited. Usually what you get is you get a certain amount, and then they throttle you down so you don't get the speed anymore. So you have to be really mindful of how you're delivering this stuff to your users, because you do not want to anger them by burning their whole data plan to watch your silly video of like your cat like jumping through a flaming hoop or something, right? Because that's most of the video traffic out there, right, is cat videos and dog videos. All right. The other issue that we have with audio and video content is this. Unless you've created it, guess what? You're probably stealing it. So if you go out there and you, let's say, find a way to download a movie, not so legally, or maybe even legally, and then you decide, you know what, I'm putting this on my website, right? So you downloaded Star Wars, and then all of a sudden it's on your website. How do you think Disney's going to feel about that, right? Because they own all that stuff now. You know what? Not only will they be angry, they're going to come after you. And you know what the penalties for copyright infringement are? They're huge. Yep. I think the minimum fine is like, yeah, that's the minimum.
And 5 years in prison.
Yep.
Or what it's called.
Yeah. $250,000 is the minimum fine on it if you're caught. So if you are publishing audio and video on your websites, and I'm talking about commercial usage, you better make sure that you're either paying the owner of that content to use it, get their permission, or better yet, create your own content. So that's kind of like a whole separate field. There are plenty of videos out there that are what they call open source, you know. So if you go to like YouTube or any of those services, and you can actually set your search filters for stuff that does not require, you know, permission to use, you can feel free and use it. And there are plenty of places that will let you use their stuff. So if you want to like take my videos and put them on your website, go for it. I don't care. I don't have them locked down. You know, I don't see them as big money makers. You know, if I was like, hey, wait a second, I'm selling millions of copies of this, and now somebody's infringing on that, and that's my bread and butter, you know, you can bet I'm going to take my lawyers and have them come after you. Now, we get a little bit of a pass because we're working educationally, folks. So for educational purposes, we can take like a copyrighted song or a copyrighted video and put it on our website because we're not trying to make money on it. It's just a learning experience. But you have to be really careful about how you do this stuff. And follow what it says here. You know, if you see something out there that you do want to use that you know is copyrighted, ask for permission. Maybe the owner of the video will say, or the audio will say, sure, go ahead. But if you could just kindly put a link back to my website, so if they want to buy it, they can go there and buy it. So some people will be just fine with you using it too. But you have to ask. You can't just do it, because that's where the trouble comes in. All right. How do we actually get the stuff in there? This is where the fun begins. But before we dive in, what I'd like to do is take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back in and start doing some coding. All right, we're going to start by looking at how to add audio files to your website. And what we're going to do here is we're going to show you a few different approaches. And this is more to get your wheels turning on it, and how you actually employ this is really kind of up to you. What you will notice is in the Unit 7 folder that you will have an assignment that asks you to add both audio and video somewhere on your website. And I'm going to recommend a couple of different approaches for doing this. But the first thing I'm going to have you think about before we go into this is the size of your files and how you add the content. All right? And I'm going to keep pressing on that. And one of the reasons this becomes an issue is especially if you use your own video files, they get huge really fast, and if you're zipping those and uploading them to Blackboard, it could take like forever. So I'm going to show you like what I think are optimum ways to do this. So that's part of what we're learning here. Let's talk first about how to go ahead and add audio files to a website. And I want you just to notice really quick that what the author is doing here is they're just simply creating a link directly to an MP3 file. And then, you know, this is what it looks like, but they have, for example, using a podcast as an example, and I'm going to instead use a music file. So I'm going to follow this technique, but do it with a music file. The first thing I want to do is I actually want to get into my site really quick, and what I want to do is just kind of figure out where I'm going to do this first. I just don't want to throw it anywhere. So this is the current state of my site, and you know, I'm like doing all this example stuff on these pages, and I'm trying to think of like where's a good spot to do this. You know what? I'm not seeing a good spot. Here's part of my problem. So I think I'm going to create a page to do some of this stuff. So I'm going to kind of be selective. I think that it makes sense that, oh, maybe, you know, maybe this is where the gallery comes in. Would we put audio and video into a gallery? We might put video into a gallery, but probably not audio, I'm thinking. So my thinking is I'm going to create a separate page, and I'm going to try to find the page that has maybe the least amount of stuff on it. Maybe the About page is a good one, so I'm going to make a copy of the About page. I'm doing that right inside Dreamweaver here. And then I'm just going to take that file and rename it. And I'm just going to call it Media. I think that sounds good to me. Does that sound good to you guys? All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open that file up. And I'm going to make sure that maybe the title is changed so I know I'm on a different page. You know, the other thing that I'm thinking here is maybe it makes a whole lot of sense that I actually add it as a menu item. So why don't I go ahead and add another page link here. So I called this page Media. And then I'll make the link say the same thing. So that's going to be a new menu item. The other thing that I should probably do is, since I'm making that change to one page, right? You guys anticipate where I'm going with this? Is to make that same change to all your pages. So I'm going to go ahead and open everything one by one. And then I'm going to copy that code that I added to each page. Put it in the same spot. And then I'm going to do a save all. Save them all at once. All right, so now they're all saved. All right. But I do have a media page. And let's change some of the stuff on here. First of all, maybe at the top here I can get rid of this paragraph. I'm certainly going to get rid of the table, right? Let's get rid of all that. And then I'm just going to create an H2, just saying media page, like that. Yes, I'll have a couple line breaks in there for right now. And now what they want us to do is go ahead and put in a link. But you know what? I need something to link to first, don't I? Why don't I go ahead and bring up my file folders here. And I was a little bit preemptive. I opened up my Web 1 folder inside of Unit 7, which is where we're still working. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, if I'm putting my images in a separate folder, maybe I should put my media files in a separate folder too. So why don't we start by creating a folder. I'm going to call mine media. And that's going to be audio and video are going to go into that folder. That's my thinking. All right. So I'm going to just go into that folder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a song I have here as an MP3 file and just move it over here. So I just have an MP3 file. It's kind of got a complicated name to it, but you know what? Dreamweaver will automatically latch onto that, so I'm not too worried about it. All right, so notice it is an MP3 file. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create the link just like they're showing. So let's create a link, and let's see, can I go to my media folder here? Oh, you know what? It's not picking up the media folder yet. Maybe we need to do a refresh. Let's do a refresh. Sure. And I'm not sure I wanted to do that exactly like that, but it hopefully will read the media folder now. So I'm just going to backspace. Still not seeing media. All right, well, I'm just going to type it in then. Media. And then there, now it's picking it up. So I'm just going to pull that in. And now I have a link to it. All right, some music. Some people will say, you know, it's not a bad idea to give people information about what they're about to pull down. So you might want to say MP3 audio file. You know, I always try to like err on the side of it's better to provide more information than less. And the reason I'm doing this, frankly, is just so that people know what the link is. Right? You might even take it as far as saying, well, you know what, let's just first see how it behaves before we take the next step. I'm going to go ahead and open this up in the browser. I don't know how much volume we have here in the room, but let's test that first. And I don't know how well Ethan can hear that out there, but I'm going to bring up our volume just a few clicks here. Okay, good enough. But now you see I do have a link on the page, right? And as I hover over that link, notice that it is pointing to that file. What's going to happen when I click on it? Yikes, I didn't realize it would be so loud. I apologize. Wow. Okay, that was like concert volume. All right. There we go. All right, so I can hear the music playing in the background. But you notice what it did? All it did is it took me to, I don't know, some page I didn't create. But really what it's doing is it recognized the file format and it invoked the internal audio player inside of HTML5's API. So it's built into every browser. So pretty darn simple to do. And at the most primitive level, you've just added music to a website. All right? No plugins. Is it streaming? It is streaming. It actually streams the music directly. It also can give you the opportunity to download the music, provided that you have the right little tools enabled in the toolbar. There's a little timer. I can pause, I can play, I can also loop it if I want. The other thing that you can allow your users to do too is with files like this, you could also put in a little instruction, click to play, or right click and download it. Because you could save the link as, and then you can download the MP3. All right, whether or not that's something you want to do. That's a real primitive approach to adding audio to a page. I am going to add a couple more, probably more than a couple more line breaks in there, just to kind of give it a little bit more definition, maybe 4 line breaks. All right, let's move on to the next example. So that's a real primitive way to do it. One thing that they do recommend that you do, and this is because of the era that we're living in now, is if you do provide content that has spoken word, it's considered etiquette to provide captions or transcripts to the file. So like what they're talking about here, they use the example of a podcast. If you have a podcast, you might want to consider taking all the text or the words in the podcast, converting it to text, and have it there so that people can read. The secondary advantage of putting a transcript out there is it's also Google searchable. Audio file is not, because it's not text. So I think that's a pretty important consideration. All right, let's talk a little bit about this Adobe Flash thing. It's kind of a weird spot in the PowerPoint for it. But Flash is this format, and anybody using Chrome these days has seen a little notice that it pops up like it almost every time you use Chrome. It says, Flash is going away, turn it off. And maybe you guys have turned it off and don't even think about it. But here I'll give you an example of a site that still uses Flash. So like I check the weather every day on the government website, and they have like a radar screen here, which they just pop up. But if you want to watch the loop of the radar thing, notice what it does? It says, click to enable Adobe Flash Player and allow. So basically, this is loading a plugin, a Flash plugin for the browser, which then plays the radar loop. And they're going to have to change this soon because by next year of December, Chrome is saying no more Flash in our browser. Now, the truth is, Flash is a technology that came about, about 20 years ago. A company called Multimedia is actually the company that developed it, not Adobe. Adobe just bought them out. So don't think that Flash is their invention. So this Multimedia company basically developed this technology that gives you a timeline-based creation tool that allows you to create animations, videos, applications, video games. It has a full programming language behind it. But its capability of creating interactive environments that are programmable was what really made it kind of a thing. And so people started creating entire websites that were built on top of Flash, the whole website operated in Flash because you could do things inside of there that you just could not do with HTML at the time. What's happened is since that time is HTML can now do those things, so it doesn't require Flash in order to play video or audio or create interactive environments. But Flash is still around as a tool. In fact, now it's called Adobe Animate instead of Flash. And its native output format, instead of going to these SWF files that they're indicating here, is now HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript as its primary output mechanism. Flash, or I should say Adobe Animate as a creation tool, is by far the most superior creation tool in its category that does what it does, and is used to create a lot of the animated television shows that you guys watch. Like if you guys are South Park fans, it's completely done in Flash, Animate. Right? So its usage is not going to go away. It's just not a way to deliver content to the web anymore. All right. Now, if we wanted in the past to take a Flash file and drop it onto a page, it was kind of a pain, frankly. You could do all these really cool interactive things, but you would have to use what they call an embed script. And you know what? You still can, but we are being told now that we're not going to run this in the browser anymore. And the reason is because it is an application delivery platform, it can allow people to hijack your system if your system's not secured properly. They can look at your camera, your microphone, your file system. They can write files to your machine, etc. So yeah, that's pretty dangerous. Pretty powerful though, but pretty dangerous. So if you wanted to go ahead and embed Flash stuff in, this is the technique that you use. You use an embed command. You link to the file, tell it what kind of file it is, set parameters for its size, and it drops in. The user does have to have the plugin in their browser to make it run. And that what I just went through to enable it, they would have to do the same thing. So you would not create a whole website around the Flash technology anymore. Now, let's go back to the audio thing. That's why I think that was a little out of sequence, you know. But let's go back to the audio thing. And I showed you one really primitive technique for getting music to play on a website. I just linked to the file. And then as soon as I linked to it, the browser said, oh, it's an MP3, let's bring up the player, right? It just did it automatically. No plugins required. However, when they were working on the HTML5 standard, they said, you know what? It is such a pain in the old days to put in an embed tag, and then you also had to put in an object tag, and then you had to have the plugin. There's like all these steps. You would end up with like 50 lines of code to drop in an audio file, right? It was a nightmare. And you know what? Half the time it didn't work on most browsers anyhow. You know, so then you provide all these fallbacks. So they got intelligent with HTML5. They said, you know what? Why don't we create tags that automatically trigger the built-in HTML5 video and audio players? Why don't we just create an audio tag and a video tag? And you don't have to write all this fancy code. There's no plugins. It just works. So this is one format for an audio tag right here. So notice the approach. There's an opening and closing tag. One of the attributes at the top, they say controls. What do you suppose that does? Volume control, play control, pause control, little time slider, you can move around, right? So by saying controls equal controls, you turn on all the controls. Then you go through and you list your source files. And here's the technique. Notice that they have source equals source, right? Source equals, and they link to the file. And then they also have a type. I'm going to tell you what, the type can be omitted, folks. It's not really necessary. When they originally drafted this, it was kind of a necessary thing to trigger the right codec, but it's really not necessary. But what they have you do is take the same file and hopefully you have it in multiple formats. And the reason you do that is to accommodate for a browser that might not play the format that you're putting out there. Not that long ago, remember I told you Firefox wouldn't play MP3s. So you always had to have a fallback. So you put your primary music file, secondary, same file, just a different format, just in case the browser can't play it. And then as a third fallback, link to it just like we did, so that the user still has a way to get to it. Right? So 3 fallbacks were kind of a standard thing. Now, if you guys haven't noticed, on our unit page, I actually have a little posting that I have here with samples of all the code. Now, unfortunately, this code is not actually text, it's like screenshots, but it shows you all the different approaches to do this stuff for both audio and video. I'm going to go ahead and create some of these following the little example that I have right here. So I'm just going to begin by coding it in. I'm going to leave that link in there anyhow, but I'm going to create this separate thing right now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these line breaks because I'm going to want some in there just to give a little separation. And then I'm going to go ahead and create audio. I'm going to type controls. And here's the thing, with the controls thing, I can say controls equals controls, or I can just say controls. The other thing I'm going to do is trigger the dreaded autoplay. Okay, so here's my little advice on that. Don't ever use this. I'm going to demonstrate why. All right. Then inside here, we are going to start indicating our source file. So I'm going to say source, and I'm going to point to that same file, right? And that's the name of the song. I'm going to pretend, I don't really have a fallback, but I'm going to pretend that I do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, put it in as if I have an OGG file, but you know what? I really don't. And you might want to be courteous to your user and tell them what the formats are. And here's the thing about this, and I'm putting this in incorrectly actually. I'm treating it as a link, and it's not at all the case, because this will not appear as text. What's going to happen is this is going to appear. This is just going to pop up in the player. And then you can either, as a backup, put like a link in like we did before, or you can just put in a message like this and just say, and if you want, you could give links to Chrome and Firefox or whatever. And it looks like I'm missing my closing things, right? See how the colored code breaks when you're missing stuff? Now, I don't know if it'll launch without this one, but this is the example, okay? I know that this one's not going to load up because I don't have an alternate format for it. If you wanted to convert your files to a different format, simply go out to the web and type audio file converter, and there's websites where you just upload your file, it converts it, and you download it, and you have it. Just so you know. I actually use a tool on my system called the Adobe Media Encoder. That tool is built into the Creative Cloud. It allows you to take any format, audio and video, and convert it to any other format with complete granular control of like every aspect of it. So I can go from like, an MP3 to a WAV, or an MOV file to an MP4, and adjust all the compression algorithms. What a lot of people do find easier though is you just go out to the web and type audio conversion, and you'll find a website that does it. All right, so let's see what this does compared to what I had before. So I assume I still have that open. I guess I don't. So let's trigger it again. Now remember, I triggered autoplay, right? Did I save my work? No, I didn't. No wonder. All right, now let's refresh. Did I put autoplay in there? It's not playing. All right, so it is working again. So why is autoplay not working? Maybe that's a blessing in disguise. I don't think I put it in wrong. Let's try it again. You know, here's my best guess. The browser is blocking it.
I think I read that recently, that Chrome doesn't even support autoplay.
Yeah. Because it's such a bad habit to be in. You know what? Let's try it in Firefox and see if Firefox still supports it. And it's probably easier to do it this way. Yeah, that's blocking it too. So autoplay. So what autoplay would do is the moment you hit the page, the music's playing. And I don't know how like you guys feel about that, but it's considered really bad etiquette. Last thing you want is like what we just had happen where the audio came on and it's like blaring loud. And like you're in the office environment pretending like you're doing work and you hit a web page and it's like, whoa, you know? Don't do it to your people, basically. All right, so let's remove autoplay. Let's save that. Let's go back to the browser and refresh. And then you notice how like Firefox's audio player looks a little bit different, right? Still pulling off the same API, still works. I have all the controls available, you know, so you can mute it, control the volume, move around the timeline, and it does stream the audio down. It doesn't download it all in one fell swoop. All right, so I think that's kind of a very simple way to add audio to your website. All right, let's move on and take a look now at doing the same thing with video. And this gets a little touchier, and here's the issue. When most of us are creating video, most of us tend to use our phones, right? I mean, these days. If you're like me, I sit here and I record videos like the one I'm recording right now. So I have like this huge backlog of videos that I create. And I have those available on my machine. But not all video formats really deliver well on the web. First of all, the high def ones are usually too bandwidth intensive for most website usage. And their file size gets so big that it chews up space on your hosting service pretty significantly. So what I recommend is that if you are going to deliver stuff to the web, you might consider getting video software that allows you to kind of downsize and scale down your video stuff so that it becomes more reasonable in its file size. All right. So what I've tried to do here is I'm going to actually take a look at some of the files that I have on my machine here. So I'm just going to jump to the desktop, and every time I'm in a class like this, I record stuff, you know. So I end up with like this huge backlog of like videos. So let's just say that, well, this is Web 1, right? May as well use a Web 1 video. Well, here's the Chapter 9 lecture. This is actually an AVI file, though. I can just tell from the way the icon is. So I'm going to actually switch this to like a view where I can see the file name properly. So you see how it's an AVI file, right? that is not ideal for delivery to the web, folks. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fire up my Adobe Media Encoder program just to give you a really quick demonstration. And you know what? This is probably not going to work. All right. Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud as to how problematic this is going to be. Because it does depend on what I'm converting from and to. Yeah, so I'm going to actually back out of what I'm doing, even though this is being recorded. So instead, I'm going to try to find something that's already in a web-safe format. So I'm going to take one of my my Java exercises here that's already in an MP4 format. And I just want you to notice, like really quickly, as I bounce around these folders, like the size of these files. You notice this last week's lecture on Chapter 9, which I don't know how long that was, like an hour or something like that. Okay, 2 hours and 24 minutes. That's 630 megabytes of storage. That's pretty darn big. It's not like high def video, like where it could be like gigabytes, but you know, that's half a gig. That's a lot of storage. That's a lot to expect your users to download for a silly screen capture video. These other formats that I had, so here, like in my Java 2 folder, where I have like these MP4 files. Notice the difference in size. This is only 61 meg. It's still pretty big, but it is significantly smaller, and that's only a half-hour video. In fact, this 10-minute video, that's 23 megabytes. That's still huge. And I don't want you taking videos of that size and putting them in your projects. You guys hearing me? I'm going to show you a different way to get your videos into your web pages, but I want to show this manual technique. I'm going to take this file because it's the smallest one, and I'm going to copy it into my Web 1 folder where I'm doing my work. I'm going to paste it in, and you know what? It's got a goofy long name that I don't like, so I'm just going to rename it to Java 2 example. That's good enough for me. Notice no spaces in the file name. All right. Let's try to get this linked up, and I'm going to use the techniques that they're showing now with video. And let's start with the video tag. And then they have a bunch of examples of like what things to add. Controls, they're putting in a poster image. We'll talk about that in a second. They're also putting in a width and a height. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to let it play it at its native size so you guys can see what that does, but you can control the size of it. And then the same thing that you did with the audio files, you put in multiple versions, fallbacks. MP4 is really the desired format, by the way. And then maybe a third fallback that just says, hey, what's your problem? Get a decent browser or provide a link. You know, one or the other, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. No autoplay on this, by the way. So we will invoke the controls. We want them to be able to start, stop, and play. And I will close the tag right away. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put those line breaks in between so the video player is not touching the audio player. And then we'll start to drop in our source media. Oops. Let's do it like this. And then I'm not going to have a fallback file, but if you want, you should, you know, throw in something. But I am going to put in just a little message. All right. being a little obnoxious, but you get the point, right? So that would be an okay fallback. It's probably more polite to provide a link to it so they can download it, but I'm just, giving you ideas here. Let's go ahead and save that, and let's bring that up in the browser now. There it is. It's there. It's huge. Right? It's a little huge. Yeah. So what we probably have to do is we probably have to look at this file. We probably actually have to look at the details of it. And what I'm looking for is the aspect ratio of the file. It shows me the data rate, the bit rate. Okay, but notice 1600 by 900 is my size. That's pretty big, right? Would you guys agree? In fact, my whole display is 1600 by 900 on this computer that you're looking at right now. So what I want to do is I want to scale it down. And so an easy math for me would be to cut these each in half, like 800 by 450. But you have to make sure it's proportional. So I'm going to go back to the code here and say width 800, height 450. Let's try that, and then let's go back and refresh. All right. Hey, that works, right? Let's see if it actually works, though. Let's click the play button. All right, and there I am talking in the background.
Chapter of our Java book, and this is an application in which we are creating a client and a server chat application. Now what I've done is I've already coded through the application, so it's not going to be...
Not that you guys care, but what I'm actually saying in there, right, when you get to Java 2, you'll care, which for some of you will be next semester. But, it's got all the controls available. I can go full screen, obviously, so I can get to that full resolution if I want. I can, scroll through and take a look at all the code. That looks pretty intimidating, right, all that code? You guys will get there, though. So that's pretty darn cool. It really is. But we have these issues, and here are the issues, folks. The issue is that video files take a huge amount of storage and a huge amount of bandwidth. And it becomes very impractical to store the stuff over time. So I was, looking at my YouTube channel just yesterday because I was trying to fix some videos. So if you guys aren't aware, right, or you should be aware, every time I record a video like this one that you're listening to right now, I take it and I pop it up on YouTube. And one of the reasons I do that is because it closed captions automatically, and that's required for all of our school videos. So I'm going to go to my particular channel just so you guys can see it. So the video I just recorded in the orientation class just before this, it's already out there. It's already public and streaming, and I can just go there, watch the video. Right, I recorded it locally on my machine. If I hit play again, I can turn on the closed captioning. Now, did you guys see me typing the closed captioning in? YouTube does that automatically. And you know what? It works really darn well. It blows me away because I teach programming courses and I use all this weird terminology and acronyms and stuff, and it picks them all up perfectly. The only thing it's not doing, if you notice, is it doesn't put in punctuation. But that's fascinating. And the funny thing is if we record videos here on campus, I can ask, we have a department that does closed captioning for us. We just put in a support ticket and they do the work. But it takes a couple days. This is instant. So I want you to think about this, and the reason I'm not trying to promote YouTube, but YouTube's got some really cool features, right? Look, they have an autoplay button, but I can also control the playback speed, so if I don't want to watch it at normal speed, I can slow it way down or speed it way up. And that's one of my favorite ways to watch like training videos, is just to speed them up, slow them down when I get to parts I like. You guys know that already. I can turn on the subtitles. I don't know if there's other languages. Well, it's got auto translate, so I guess. But then it also has a quality setting. So I can let it go automatic, or I can scale it down if I got a low bandwidth connection. And what YouTube does beautifully is really every time that you upload a video to them, it auto processes it and renders it in various formats. So depending on the person's speed, it'll just automatically scale it down. Here's the other beauty. If I upload my videos to YouTube, I'm not using my server space and my hosting, right? And I also have a built-in worldwide audience for anything I put out there. So even if they don't go to my website, they'll catch it on YouTube, right? So that's kind of like a promotion in and of itself. And there's a social media aspect of it. And Google provides all these crazy, crazy tools. So let me show you some of the stuff that you can do here. Like if you go into their studio product, which runs their whole YouTube thing, it gives me all these stats, for example. So check it out. It tells me that I have 568 subscribers. I find that astounding because I'm not trying to get them. But I average like 1 or 2 new ones a day lately. Yeah. And I have like, I got a really funny email yesterday from a guy. He goes, I was watching your Java videos, and do you have the second part of the exercises for chapter 5? He's like from some different school, somewhere else, you know. I just thought that hilarious. I'm like, sorry, I'm not teaching that class right now. Next semester I might upload it, whatever. But I dig this part of it, like the analytics part of it. It shows me like the views, and not only that, but it can go like video by video. Look at all the stats that it keeps for you. I can see what people are actually watching. I think it's just so cool. It really is. Anyhow, all right. So you got all these great tools. You upload your videos for free. If I have a video, in fact, you know, and let's say I'm looking at this video and you know what, there's like something like wrong with it, you know, I can use YouTube's video editor to fix it. I can create overlays, add music to it, put captions myself or whatever. This is just, I didn't like download a piece of software, folks. It's just all there. I just think that's like so cool. I can't even like contain myself as to how cool this is, because it's all free and it's just attached to any Google account, not just like the school account that I have. Any Google account has this attached automatically. All right, so it just gives you all these capabilities. So then the issue becomes this. Why on earth would you like take your own video and encode it and take it and put it as a file in your file system on your web server? You're a fool. That's kind of my thinking. A music file, okay, fine. A video file, put it on YouTube, put it on Vimeo. There's a bunch of other services too. Those are the 2 big ones. The accounts are free, the tools are awesome, and you can, you know what, you can share the video. So all I'm going to do is copy that address so I can just give them a link to the video. Or, better yet, you click this little tool here, Embed, and you grab that code, go back to your IDE, your tool, your video tool, paste the code in. You don't worry about what it says. Just paste it in, right? I'm going to put some more line breaks in though. Let's save that. Let's go back to the browser and refresh. Okay, so there's my audio stuff, my local video, and now there's my YouTube video. And here's the tip, folks. If you guys are going to put video on your website for assignments in this class, please use the YouTube approach. There are plenty of videos that you can find that people have out there, and they're perfectly okay with you doing exactly what I just did. If you can go in there and click share, click on embed and get the code, it's yours for the taking. There are occasions though, and I'm going to show you this, where you do run into this issue. And I'm trying to think of, you know, so somebody name a band they like.
Metallica.
Metallica.
Must be
Yeah, I'm sure their stuff is locked down.
It's all five-finger death
All right.
punch.
Okay, Metallica, Nothing Else Matters, official music video. So it's official, right? So it comes
It's
from,
not that easy. But
all
they're
right,
related.
sorry about the audio.
I get the same commercials.
All right, so here's their wonderful video, whatever. Whether you like them, hate them, or whatever, I really don't care. But if you come in here and click embed, well, they might actually allow it. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to try putting that on my page, and I want to see if it works. I have some thought that it might not, but we're going to find out in just a second. Some people care, and some people, frankly, don't. So let's see if this one pops up. Well, this one seems to pop up. You will get some of these, though, and if you get the embed code, and the first part of the address is missing, so for example, like this part is missing. It's a little hint that they don't want you linking to it. I thought that, you know, with an official Metallica video,
Well, they're one of those, 50
might be
bands
one of those. Now, some people really lock their stuff down pretty heavily. So let's just go to like the main music page and find something that's like really popular. I don't know. It's like none of these I want to click on, so that's like a separate issue. Let's find one that maybe we do want to. All right, so I think like a lot of these, like, see these Vivo videos. Let's go to the Cranberries. That should be fairly safe. All right, let me see. Yeah, and I'm trying to look at their embed code. Now that one's going to work too. But if you find one and you put it on your page and all of a sudden you hit play and it says this video won't play here, you got to go to YouTube, and maybe you've seen that even on Facebook. So you got to be careful. And then, you know, the reason some people do allow it is because the ads that they are making money off of still follow the video to wherever they go. So some people are okay with it. Some people are absolutely not okay with it. I mark all of my videos public and free to embed, but some people click the little boxes that say don't embed, and then you can't do it. But to add video to your page for the assignment in this chapter, that's what I want you to do. You see how easy it is, right? And that's a better approach than creating your own video and uploading it. So even if you do create your own video content, I would strongly encourage you, if you don't use YouTube, use Vimeo or one of the other services, there's many. That's really kind of the best way to proceed. All right, let's take a break again. I think that this is a really logical spot to stop. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And this last section of the PowerPoint is going to cover a number of different concepts. I'm going to be going through these relatively quickly and not really demonstrating any of them. So you guys can experiment with these on your own. The point is just to get the information across, but all the stuff that really is relevant to the assignments that you have to do, we've already covered from this PowerPoint. All right, so let's talk first about this concept here. You guys probably go to websites pretty often, and you go up to their menu structure, and you hover over an item, and then like a drop-down menu pops up. And there's a number of different ways to do those. And in the really old days of interactive web development, we would typically use JavaScript to do this. And JavaScript allowed for the interactivity. It allowed for stuff to appear and disappear and create hover effects and links and all that stuff. But the beautiful thing is with the advancements in CSS now, we can do all of the stuff with just straight CSS code. Even the interactive components, CSS handles all of that. So there are entire techniques. I really don't worry about it too much in this class because I do consider it a more advanced technique, but when you guys are in your JavaScript class, or we used to teach a jQuery class way back when, we used to do this as an exercise and an assignment. But I do consider it a little bit higher end skill because it's really easy to get lost doing this. So what I generally recommend to people is, unless you have a really specific guide for doing it with example code, you're going to struggle with it. It is an advanced technique. But the general rule of thumb is to follow these basic steps. You set up your nav with position set to relative. And then you sit there and you code your submenu items by creating embedded unordered lists in an unordered list. So your menu would start by being an unordered list, and then any sub-menu item would be an unordered list inside of a list item. All right, so that's the hierarchy, and that's what they're referring to there. So then you would take that sub-menu that's inside of a list item and initially set it to display none. And then based on the hover over the menu item, so you take the menu item however you've identified it with a class or an ID or whatever, and then you attach the :hover to it, and as you hover, then you set the display to appear, and then give it, here they're doing absolute positioning. I would caution you on that, and I would actually say that relative positioning is maybe more appropriate, as it scales screen size basically. And then that allows the item to appear and then behave in that way. It's not really that tricky when you understand the principles of it, but if you don't understand the principles of it, and here's a recommendation. There's great tutorials out on the internet. So if you just type like CSS drop-down menu example and Google that, you'll probably find like 100 really cool examples, all of them with little nuances. But it can be done strictly with CSS. Like I said, in the old days, we would use JavaScript to do this, just as an interesting side note. Another thing that's kind of cool with CSS is that you have this ability. It's got all these little extra things that you can do that we really haven't formally studied. And a lot of them, there's so many of them, frankly, that you can't really squeeze them into a course efficiently. So you end up kind of exploring them on your own, but they give you a couple little neat tidbits. So for example, by default, any image you pop onto a page that's rectangular in shape will sit square, right? Straight up and down and straight across. But you can throw in the CSS property for transform, where you can rotate your image a little bit. And that's actually kind of a nice little effect. That can be a pretty effective technique. So you can actually take anything on the page, any element on the page, and rotate it. And yes, you can take something and make it upside down, or go from the bottom to the top, or whatever. So I think that's kind of an interesting little technique. CSS also has a thing called transition property, which allows you to basically create transitions. So if you think of like, if you're in a PowerPoint, and if you guys have ever done a PowerPoint and you switch from slide to slide and it kind of like fades in and fades out, that's what the transition thing does. So what they have set up there is the fact that if you hover over a navigation element, it will transition in a background for that element over a 2-second time frame. That's what this stands for. So you set a background color, so like originally it's blue, and then just by hovering over the next menu item, it fades into white. That's what that does. That's just a very simple little example, but very effective. And you know what? Next time you go to a website and you're hovering around or moving over objects, you will see little fades. There's some websites you go to, they fade in all the content, but the whole darn site. And that's just a technique. It makes it look more interactive and a little less jagged. It's a little more pleasing to the eye, some people think. I think that's highly subjective. Most of the time I think to myself, just get the content on the screen. Do I really need that animation? But sometimes, that little bit of interactivity also helps to highlight certain aspects of the site, and frankly, it's just kind of cool, So experiment with that, but don't go too crazy with it. is my suggestion. All right. They do have some elements that they use, and I'm not a huge user of this, but you know, I see people using it. But they do have these elements that you can throw in called detail and summary elements, and you know, if you wonder how some people do these like little expando things, and what they've basically done is they've taken that technique from regular application development and applied it into an HTML format. So if you have something where you have, let's say, like 5 different bulleted items and that each have like sublists, you can put those tags in, and it creates a little thing, and it shows the thing, and it all does it all automatically for you. I would caution you on that though, because some users, and this has always been my contention, higher end screen users get it, right? Oh, that's one of those things where if I click on it, it expands. But a lot of like people that aren't quite so sharp with technology miss it altogether. So if there's like key content that you're trying to carry across, I would avoid it, and I wouldn't hide it. But if you're trying to really reserve screen space and you really kind of don't care if they see the sub item, you figure if they're clever, they're going to find it anyhow, then go for it. You know, kind of, you know, casual, common sense rule of thumb kind of thing. All right, another little thing that they have you do in the case studies attached to this chapter is this CSS image gallery thing. And this is a really primitive type of image gallery where basically you're going to have a collection of images as thumbnails on one side of the screen, and as you mouse over an image, the larger version of it pops up on the side. They give you the code here, the CSS code, and the HTML code to make this happen. This does require that for each image you have a big version and a small version. So you create a thumbnail version and you create the full-size version, and you also have to make sure that they fit. So if you're going to do an image gallery like this, make sure all your images for the thumbnails are consistent in size, and then they're also consistent in size on the large side so that they fit all the parameters of this. But this is nice little example code, and you know what? It works pretty darn well to do an image gallery like this. I used to use this technique a lot in the old days of my development, and I used to get oohs and ahs for it. You know, I can show you a couple of examples if you're curious. You know, people would often have image galleries and they would just put all the full res images up there, and then those all have to load up on the page. But if you do an image gallery, you don't have to load the big ones until they mouse over. It's really a lot more efficient for the viewer. But it's kind of a neat little technique. I'm not saying this is the best gallery approach, but it's an approach you can use. You can, of course, play with it and come up with different things. All right. They're also putting transitions on there. I don't know if you're noticing that, but they start out as you mouse over something. Its opacity, it's set to be opaque to start with, and then it fades in and fades out. That's what the images do. So kind of a little bit of interactivity. All right, let's talk about Java, because this is kind of a weird topic, and I'm going to say that this probably should be removed from the slideshow at this point. But you guys that are already studying this language, if you're full-time student, you're taking Java Programming 1 this semester. That's one of your required things. You guys probably know most of these things already, and that is Java is a object-oriented language. It developed by Sun Microsystems, then purchased by Oracle. It is an open system. Everybody can use it for free. Even the tools to create it are free.
What's the rumor about them saying that you can't get it for free? I heard a rumor that Oracle's not going to make it free anymore.
That's just a rumor. Yeah, I haven't heard that rumor at all. Yeah, the question was that he heard that they might not make Java free anymore. I don't know anybody that would lock down their language and make you pay for it, because as soon as they do that, nobody's going to use it. Nobody would pay to use it at that point. They would just transition to other languages over time. One thing that you guys will learn, though, as we start to learn JavaScript, and we're going to touch it a little bit at the end of this semester, but when you go into the JavaScript class, you're going to learn it full on. That is a programming language, but it is not Java. Java and JavaScript just simply share a portion of their name, but really have nothing to do with each other. Java is a full-blown programming language that's object-oriented, compiled. It also has this runtime environment that allows you to deploy it to basically any type of device, regardless of what it is. But JavaScript is something that runs in the browser. Now, the interesting thing about Java as a programming language, and this is the world I came from when I first learned back-end coding, for example. We were able to add plugins to our browsers back then, right? Java itself was a plugin. So the same way we would install the JRE on our operating system to run Java programs, you could also add a Java plugin to your browser to allow you to run Java applets. So, and what that would do is it actually created a little container, just like Flash did, that allowed you to run programs inside the browser. This is considered completely antiquated now. We just do not do this at all. And when we teach people how to do web content in our Java classes, this is not taught at all anymore because the browsers don't support it. Some of the browsers completely block it. Some of them still allow you to install the plugin, but just like with Flash, it's highly insecure because you are giving a developer a portal into your system, access to your file system, access to your devices. That's some pretty scary stuff, right? And some people do use it as a malicious platform to deliver content, and we used to do a lot, 20 years ago, we used to do a lot of work with Java applets. Like there's like certain things you could not do with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so you needed a real programming language to do it. Now what we've done instead, and here's an example of throwing it in, but what we do instead these days is we write server-side Java code and then have that develop our HTML for us. And when you guys get into the Java Programming 2 class, I will teach you 3 different ways to write back-end Java code that still create web pages. So that's going to be something you learn down the road. At this point, this is considered completely obsolete. And the only place you're going to run into it is on really old legacy websites, and then you'll try to load the thing up and it won't run because you don't have the plugin, and then you'll discover you can't even get the plugin anymore. So completely irrelevant. Should be removed from the PowerPoint. Sorry, author. Should have done that with this edition. All right. Now let's move on to JavaScript. And JavaScript is hugely important in web work. In fact, I'm going to say that JavaScript right now might be, next to Python, C#, and Java, the most important programming language to learn, depending on what you actually do. JavaScript it's not a compiled programming language. So when we run JavaScript, you don't have to compile it and debug it, turn it into machine code, and then execute it. It runs on the fly. So we call that, it's an interpreted language, meaning it does not compile, it just runs, right? And that requires a runtime engine in order to make that happen. All of our browsers have built into them a JavaScript runtime engine and a console, which we saw, right? That's where you see your errors. And originally, JavaScript was designed to be a client-side language only, meaning this, that it runs directly in your browser, and therefore, because it runs in your browser, you can, like your CSS and HTML, you can just right-click View Source and see exactly the code that was written to create it, right? And what it's good for is doing things that we cannot do with HTML and CSS. So that is controlling content on the screen, making stuff appear, disappear, move, do math, animate things, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many things you can do with it, it's kind of crazy. What's happened with JavaScript, though, is this. In the last 5 years, there's been this explosion in this technology called Node.js. When you guys go into your Web Programming 2 class next semester, if you're a full-timer, that's a language or a platform you're going to learn. And what that is the ability to run JavaScript server-side. So it used to be that if we ever wanted to run server-side code, you'd have to learn a separate programming language, PHP, Java, C#, whatever it was. You'd have to learn that separate language. It would operate on the server. And then somebody got clever and it's like, well, if people already know how to code for the front end and know JavaScript, why don't we create a back-end tool that also runs JavaScript? And that's how we got Node.js. And so that's been a huge explosion in the last 5 years. In fact, to the point where that's the primary go-to for a lot of developers. And when you hear that term full stack developer, most of those full stack developers use JavaScript with Node.js on the back end to drive the front end of their applications too. So JavaScript on the front end, client side, JavaScript on the back end, server side. So that's a huge development. That should be included here, but it's kind of missing. I'm just telling you that. She should update her pages a little bit, assuming it's a she. All right. So what do you do with JavaScript? Well, you can do pop-ups. So all the stuff that you see listed there. In the past, we used to use JavaScript pretty extensively for doing form validation. So prior to sending information off to a server, JavaScript would check to make sure that it was in the right format, text or numbers or length, or whether something's even there. You can create windows, you do image rollover, status messages, you can tie into system resources, display the date, the time, and you can do math, and that's huge, right? Because if you can do math, you can do all sorts of stuff. You can animate things, all sorts of crazy things. JavaScript operates based on this thing called the document object model. I don't need you guys to internalize this too much right now. When you get to your JavaScript class, when you take that class proper, you'll learn about this in detail. But what this basically means is that everything on the screen, when we go into like an inspect mode, so I'm just going to bring up like Mr. Robot page here. You go into an inspect mode and you bring up this panel. This view of the web page that we have here is in the form, I guess I don't have a lot of content there, is in the form of the document object model. So every part of the page breaks down and everything is nested inside something else. So these are all parts of the document object model in our hierarchy. That's what this document is attempting to show you. And then notice how we have the window, the document, right, the page that we're creating, and then the tags, the forms, the images, the links, all the stuff that's on the page. Each breaks down into a node, and each one of those nodes can be controlled with JavaScript. Everything from the window all the way through this whole structure. That includes the history of your browser. So for example, if I put a little piece of JavaScript in there, and you click on it, I can tell the browser to go back 3 clicks in your history. Yeah. That's kind of freaky. And that's a technique that some people use so that you can't get off their website. Did you ever go to a website, the back button, and you can't get out of there? Yeah. Thank you, Facebook. That's one of them. Yeah, and there's other ways you can figure your way past it, but you can also control the location. So I can put somebody on a page, and relative to a click, or even, sometimes just landing on a page, it takes you to a different page. Interesting. I can also get in there and probe the actual browser itself. So this navigator sub thing shows basically what browser you're using and which version of the browser. And it's not an uncommon technique that people will write code to test to see which browser is this. Okay, this is Firefox running on an iPad. And you can probe the browser to exactly pull that information in, because you know what they do with it? They keep statistics. How many iPad users are viewing the website? Or, this person's using an iPad, well, I better give them the low-res version because they obviously don't have like a giant display, that type of thing. But they do use it to keep track mostly. what type of people are viewing the site. Another really important aspect of JavaScript is this technology called AJAX. Once again, something you're going to learn about in detail later, but AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And what this allows us to do as a technology is to create web pages like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up in my browser here my email program. So please don't read any of the messages, but I'll click on one that's like an ad. All right, here's one that's an ad, right? Now, I'm on this page right now, right, and I have an application that's running. And when I click on this message, it's going to load this message. But you know what didn't happen? Is it didn't refresh the screen. But yet, it changed the screen. What it did is by clicking on that message header, it decided that, oh, you want to look at this message? I can go to the server and retrieve just that message and put it on this part of the screen. I didn't change anything else. You know why? Because I don't have to. So that's just an example. So it allows you to dynamically pull in external content without refreshing the page. That's huge because that technology alone has made it possible for us to do things like email in our browser. If I had to like reload all these tools every time I was in here, that's kind of problematic. And you know, and if I want to click reply, right, you know, what is it doing? It's just throwing up another tool that's pulling it in via AJAX again. All right, that's a little bit more advanced skill, but that's some of the stuff that you can do with JavaScript that you can't do otherwise. And JavaScript has been around for quite a while and evolved. And JavaScript now, because it's been around for so long, people have created what we call JavaScript libraries. The biggest and most important one of those is called jQuery. In fact, they also call it an API, an application programming interface, because it gives you a shortcut way to do really powerful things with very little code. If you're really curious about how jQuery works, I would encourage you to go to the W3 Schools site and just do like the first couple simple tutorials on jQuery. Once again, you'll do all that stuff in your JavaScript class, so I'm not too worried that you won't learn it. But when people write JavaScript, their go-to library typically is jQuery for doing like things like, I don't know, moving things around the screen, or fading things in and out, or hiding and showing things. Because I can do it in so much less code than using JavaScript directly. That's really kind of the point of it. Hugely popular, and jQuery can be used to do a lot of different things, like what they say here: image slideshows, animations, event handling, document manipulation, email, you know, all that kind of stuff that we were just doing. jQuery, I don't know if Google first created it, but they were the first real big proponents of it. And it is by far, folks, the biggest JavaScript library out there to learn, and the most important one. Interestingly, with HTML5, they added a bunch of capabilities to our browsers natively. And these are not small things. They kind of go through them really quickly. But overall, what they've added is what they call a collection of APIs. Once again, application programming interfaces that allow us to do really powerful things with a minimum of code. So the four big ones that they did was, one, geolocation. So if you guys ever go to a website and it says, do you want to allow this website to know your location? Yeah. But well, sometimes that's kind of necessary, right? Like if you're pulling up a map on your phone and you want to get directions, it wants to know where you are right now so it can tell you where you're going, right? So sometimes you have to allow it. You don't always have to. But yeah, you can geolocate things pretty precisely. Right, and they have examples here. In fact, I used to use this one in class, and I'm curious to see if it still works, because my memory tells me that the last time I tried it, it didn't work, but let's try it anyhow. So notice how it's trying to get my location, little pop-up. All right, and what this code does, and this isn't magic code, Well, that's not where I'm located, that's for sure. Oh, yeah. So they're, and this is what they've done now, is they blocked it. But it used to be that with this example, it would find me on the map, right? In the right building, in the right spot in the building. And if you guys don't believe it, when, you know, here's the better proof of it. Like if you go to Google Maps, right, and you're on your phone, I can find myself on here, right? I just click that little tool. Okay, I didn't mean to do that. All right, so it looks like they've got it turned up. But if you click on that, it should like zoom in and show you right where you're sitting. I don't know why it's not working. It says from your phone location history. All right, should I click update? So it's actually, it's not pulling it off of my computer. And maybe I missed a little allow thing up here or something. Or here we go. This page is tracking your location. But if I zoom in on that, see how it's got me placed? Do you notice that's actually the technical building? Do you notice where it's putting us in the technical building?
Right where we are?
Yeah, right where we are in the technical building. Some pretty scary stuff, folks.
Yes, it is.
It is. Here's a funny thing. I don't know if you guys know this about geolocation. Because you got like this feature on your phone, you can go in there, you can turn off location services. But they can still get you. They triangulate off of Wi-Fi. And if you turn that off, they triangulate off the cell towers. Turn off your phone, pull out the battery. There's RFID chips. They can still find you.
The battery used to work.
Yeah. It's crazy. And they, you know, how do they get so precise with it? They use a combination of all those technologies. The location services is satellite based. The cellular towers, all they need is 3 towers pinging your phone, and they can get you within 5 feet. Wi-Fi is the same way. Yeah, so even if you're not connecting to a Wi-Fi, you got the Wi-Fi turned on. As you're driving past it, it's like, oh, you just pinged on this one, you just pinged on that one. So if you're a criminal trying to run, get rid of your cell phone, they're going to get you.
Or get a burner phone.
Yeah, don't even buy a burner phone, they'll find that too. Don't buy any modern clothing because there's RFID tags embedded into them. Your car's got chips all over it. They got your number, folks, so you're not getting away. Nowhere to run to. That's pretty fatalistic, right? Welcome to the web world, folks. All right. The other thing that they added to HTML5 that's really cool is this web storage API, and that allows us now to significantly increase the amount of stuff that we put on users' machines. Predominantly, that is text. Okay? So why do you do that? To make the browsing experience for the user richer and more powerful. So the other thing that gets tied into that, the local storage part of it, also allows us to work with internal databases. So you can create databases attached to your applications, store them on the user's machine. So every time they visit your site, you're using a local database to manipulate information, which is pretty powerful, very powerful. It also allows us to store session information, which was also kind of a difficult thing to do in the past without a back-end language. So now we can actually use JavaScript on the front end to interact with session storage on the user's machine and actually maintain a state. And this is kind of higher end stuff once again. But the reason I mention it is these are pretty significant advances and really explain why there's been such an explosion in like mobile development and web development since HTML5's been on the scene. These are really, really powerful aspects. And as you become advanced programmers, these are things you'll contend with pretty often. The other thing that you're able to do is create what we call offline web applications. So in other words, you pull an application down to your computer and you can still use it. What's fascinating about that is most of our mobile applications that we use on our phones are nothing more than glorified web pages that have been downloaded to your phone. Yeah, When you go to the Windows Store on your PC and you download those applications, those are all glorified web pages, all of them.
So really nothing fancy.
Well, they can still be pretty sophisticated. Doesn't mean they're not fancy. All right, let's move on to the last couple things here. Another huge advancement in HTML5 was the fact that they brought in the canvas element. And the canvas element really is a container that allows us to do the things that they're indicating here. It basically gives us a space on the screen where we can dynamically create content, usually with JavaScript. But Canvas is the platform that is replacing Flash as a delivery mechanism for interactive content. So Canvas has become kind of like the universal interactive development platform. So when I create stuff in Adobe Flash, okay, now called Animate, and I export it now, it'll export to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Most of the interactive content for those applications runs inside of a Canvas element. That's what allows it to happen. So because it's part of the browser, we don't have to worry about it like hijacking our system or anything like that, because the browser's not really capable of doing that directly. The Canvas element is kind of fun to play with. Here's some really quick little example code. In the Web 2 class, you will play with this a little bit, but I'm going to tell you what, if you learn how to manually code for Canvas, that's like a whole thing on its own. There's entire books, courses, and development streams on that. There's a lot of people doing game development in this platform now for delivery to, like, you know, online systems and phones or whatever. But I still think that you're usually better off with a content creation tool like Adobe Animate to generate content for this, because hand coding stuff for visually complex interfaces is kind of a cumbersome process when you do it by code. If you can do it with a graphical tool, you can accelerate things and it writes the code for you. That's really what you want to do. But that's like a whole separate field of study, and I think it's amazing what you can do with it. But some really quick sample code there just to get you kind of peeked on it. All right, final wrap up here, folks, on the lecture part. Some things to kind of keep in mind. With multimedia stuff, there's some general rules of thumb. You know, multimedia is cool to put on a web page. In fact, you know, like one of the things I think we like about going to sites like Facebook, for example, is the fact that everybody posts like silly little videos they find or memes or whatever. But when we think multimedia, we're really thinking audio and video. And I think, you know, the newer generations don't even think about audio as a format. They just consider that part of the video file, so that's just kind of a mindset. There's not really a lot of, you know, things stopping us these days. In the past, people used to get kind of paranoid. So, for example, if you had like Flash content on your page, you'd always have to worry about the users having a Flash plugin. Or if you were pushing certain kind of video content, you had to make sure they had the right codecs, and that was dependent on the browser. So these days, I think these considerations are significantly less, just simply because all the equipment's gotten better, the browsers have gotten better, and the bandwidth is significantly better. And I think over time, we won't even have to like think about any of the fallbacks anymore, that anything that we push out there will just work. And I think we're pretty close to that era already. The amount that it's progressed just in the last 5 years that HTML5's been around blows my mind. Because when I was teaching this stuff like 10 years ago, to put a video on a page, I mean, we'd spend weeks in class getting to the point where we could do it, because there were so many considerations. Everybody was using such bad technology, and the browsers were not compliant, and, you know, lots of little issues. These days, the stuff works so well, it's kind of scary. All right, this is a summary of the chapter, folks. The big takeaways, I think, are how to put audio and video on a page, and that's one of your assignments. All right, so this video ends here.